This is macOS Ken.
iPhone shipments defy gravity, update and security news, and Mr. Softy makes a questionable call. It is Tuesday, the 14th of April, 2026. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Clean My Mac, keeping Macs running smoothly since 2008. Try 7 days free and use my code macOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/macOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Smartphone sales were down last quarter for every top 5 vendor but Apple. That is the word from Counterpoint Research. In a post posted late last week, the firm said the global smartphone market remained under pressure in the first quarter of 2026, with shipments declining 6% year-on-year, driven by the shortage of DRAM and NAND memory components and weaker demand. Yeah, just because I took time off
doesn't mean Ragnarok did.
One Counterpoint analyst says the decline was mostly driven by memory makers feeding the AI data center beast. That forced consumer electronics makers to pay more for the parts they need, passing those higher costs on to customers. Added to supply constraints are rising energy prices, higher logistics costs, and economic uncertainty driven by tension in the Middle East. That had a lot of people giving truly new devices a pass, going instead for new-to-them devices, aka second-hand or refurbished phones. Taking the hardest hit, price-sensitive customers and the folks who make things for them. The piece says volume-driven Chinese brands experience sharper declines, especially in price-sensitive regions, contributing to the overall drop in global shipments. Sharper than whom? There can be only one. According to Counterpoint, Apple led the global smartphone market for the first time for a first quarter, achieving 21% market share and 5% year-on-year growth in Q1 26. Apple remains the most insulated brand against the memory crisis due to its ultra-premium positioning and highly integrated supply chain. Continuous strong demand for the iPhone 17 series and aggressive trade-in programs, along with ecosystem stickiness, drove overall volume growth despite a softer macro environment. Apple was the only smartphone maker in the Counterpoint top 5 to show growth. Outside the top 5, Google and Nothing had nothing to be ashamed of. Smartphones made by the former were up 14% year-on-year, while the latter saw growth of 25%. Even new things can get busted. For its newest things, Apple is selling parts to fix them. Mac Rumors ran a piece midweek last week saying Apple's self-service repair program had started stocking parts and tools for fixing recently launched hardware. Really recently launched. For you do-it-yourselfers and small business owners, tools and parts are now available for iPhone 17e, iPad Air with M4 chip, MacBook Neo, MacBook Air with M5 chip, MacBook Pro with M5 Pro and M5 Max chips, Studio Display 2026, and Studio Display XDR. The Big Bang Beta Parade rolls on. Apple on Monday seeded the second betas of iOS and iPadOS 26.5 to developers, according to a piece from Mac Rumors. Other pieces from the same site say same goes for macOS Tahoe 26.5, as well as 26.5 versions of watchOS, tvOS, and visionOS. Not much new spotted as of this writing, though there was a friendly reminder/warning in the iOS beta. Yet another piece from Mac Rumors says the Maps app for iPhone now has a splash screen, letting people know that ads are coming to the application. Under an Apple Ads banner is the message, Maps may show local ads based on your approximate location, current search terms, or view of the map while you search. For your privacy, advertising information is not linked to your Apple account. While I was busy making art, hitting Hollywood, and mowing the lawn last week, Apple issued a wee bit of an update. A piece from 9 to 5 Mac says the Cupertino company released iOS and iPadOS 26.4.1 last Wednesday. Release notes touted bug fixes and nothing else, though the updates did do something else. According to the piece, the incremental iOS and iPadOS updates activated stolen device protection by default for iPhones and iPads in enterprise programs. In case you've forgotten, stolen device protection introduces stumbling blocks for devices in certain situations. Apple explains that devices with the protection turned on have additional security requirements when they're away from familiar locations, such as home or work. These requirements help prevent someone who has stolen a device and knows the device's passcode from making critical changes to a user's account or device. Stolen device protection was actually turned on by default for non-enterprise devices with the release of iOS and iPadOS 26.4. No indication as to why Apple waited on the enterprise side, nor why it pushed ahead last week. If you use OpenAI apps on the Mac, the company suggests you update post-haste. 9 to 5 Mac ran another security-focused piece late last week that had the AI juggernaut asking users of its Mac software to update to the latest releases out of an abundance of caution, saying that they had identified a security issue involving the third-party developer tool Axios. OpenAI said it was taking steps to protect the process that certifies its macOS applications are legitimate OpenAI apps. They say they found no evidence that OpenAI user data was accessed, that their systems or intellectual property were compromised, or that their software was altered. Still, better safe than sorry. An update of security certifications will, or would, require all macOS users to update their OpenAI apps to the latest versions. If you let iOS show you previews of incoming messages on the lock screen, you might not want to do that. Not if you want to keep them secret. 404 Media ran a piece late last week that had the FBI forensically extracting copies of incoming Signal messages from a defendant's iPhone even after the app was deleted. Hey, isn't Signal supposed to be secret? And shouldn't deleting the app from your phone delete its data as well? Yes, and yes, and yet. According to multiple people present for FBI testimony, 404 says copies of content were saved in the device's push notification database. A supporter of defendants in the case told 404 Media, "We learned that specifically on iPhones, if one's settings in the Signal app allow for message notifications and previews to show up on the lock screen, then the iPhone will internally store those notifications or message previews in the internal memory of the device. Only incoming messages were captured, according to the report, not outgoing. The messages in question had been set to disappear, according to folks in the know, and had in fact disappeared in the Signal app." 404 Media says the issue of notification saving some message data is likely not limited to the Signal app, but is a more fundamental friction between secure messaging apps and how Apple stores notifications. If you'd like greater control over that, you can go to Settings, then Notifications. If I'm reading 404 correctly, from there you can go into whatever application sends you push notifications and toggle lock screen previews on or off. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, Clean My Mac, keeping Macs running smoothly since 2008. One of the things I appreciate about my Mac kind of stays out of my way. In my mind, it's not so much a computer or even a tool as a place I go to do stuff. But like every place, the kitchen, the art studio, a workshop, still needs tending. That's what Clean My Mac does. It keeps the workplace that is your Mac running smoothly. There are so many things that can add friction to your Mac. Duplicate files, broken downloads, malware. Nobody wants to have to do the dishes when they go to make a meal, though, or empty the bin when they go to work on a project. Clean My Mac takes care of such chores, keeping your Mac ready for you and whatever you want to do. Get tidy today. Try 7 days free and use my code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/MacOSKen. Make MacOSKen all caps in both places. That way they know where you heard about it and you get the discount. Try 7 days free and use my code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/MacOSKen. Again, MacOSKen is all caps, both places. Use code MacOSKen20 for 20% off at clnmy.com/MacOSKen. A few updates tied to Apple Creator Studio about which to tell you. Cult of Mac ran a piece late last week that had Apple updating Logic Pro and Pixelmator Pro. On the sound side, the Logic Pro update brings a Step Reflex Modern Garage Pack. That's new beats, bass lines, synths, and other sonic offerings. Additionally, the app brings an option to export a shareable file to preview how a spatial audio mix will sound when streamed on Apple Music, an export option that sounds like the name of 5 droids from Star Wars all said at once, and a fix for legacy content that went missing in the original Logic Pro 12 update. Shifting to the visual, the Pixelmator Pro update adds RAW support for several cameras, workflow improvements, and more. Both apps are available as standalone purchases according to the cult. They are also part of the Apple Creator Studio bundle, available by subscription. On the sort of annoying, though not surprising side, the old versions of Pages, Numbers, and Keynote for Mac have gone away. A piece from 9 to 5 Mac says that leaves just the newer builds that support Apple Creator Studio. That actually already happened for iPhone and iPad, according to the piece. On Apple's phones and tablets, the old versions were replaced by the new ones as software updates. But both lived on in the Mac App Store. Until now. It's neither as scary nor as awful as it sounds. The piece says people who've previously downloaded the old versions can still see them in download history and re-download them if they need or want to. New users only get the new versions, though again, it's not a huge deal. To be clear, says 9 to 5 Mac, Pages, Keynote, and Numbers are still entirely free for download on the Mac. You don't need to be a Creator Studio subscriber to use the vast majority of features. But the piece says they include encouragements to subscribe to Creator Studio to unlock the full feature set. Personally, I've got both on my Mac. I've been using the new version of Pages for the past few weeks and haven't found it terribly irksome. I've even found the paywall features kind of tempting, so I guess that means the freemium versions are doing what they're supposed to do. And finally today, cue the sad trombone. Microsoft's plan for battling MacBook Neo is apparently to make its Surface laptops and tablets cost twice as much as Neo or more. The site Windows Central says Mr. Softy is raising prices on all its current Surface PC offerings, with the mid-range devices now starting at above $1,000 and flagships starting at $1,500. A Microsoft spokesperson told Windows Central, Due to recent increases in memory and component costs, Surface is updating pricing on Microsoft.com for its current generation hardware portfolio. We remain committed to delivering value to customers and partners while upholding our standards for quality and innovation.
Ragnarok.
The piece says the Surface Pro 12-inch tablet PC hybrid, which used to start at $799, now starts at $1,049. A similar story for the Surface laptop. The entry-level 13-inch version used to start at $899. Today's starting price, $1,149. To be clear, those have been gradual steps, not straight from $899 to $1,149. Still, it's quite a hefty hike. While those are increases in prices for buying direct, the report says other retailers are expected to raise their prices soon. I know it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, if you'll pardon my use of that term, but MacBook Neo starts at $599. Might be time to dust off the "Hello, I'm a Mac" campaign. macOS Can, brought to you by me and sponsored by Clean My Mac, keeping Macs running smoothly since 2008. Try 7 days free and use my code macOSCan20 for 20% off at clny.com/macOSCan. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can find me on Mastodon, macOSCan at mastodon.social. You can also send me an email, info@macOSCan.com. Until next time, that is news from macOS Can. I'm Ken Ray.
It's still sunny.